children's last hope. Guard dog protects them from deadly alien forces. Mac Harrington had grown used to the solitude of his life on Nelvara 4. The dusty planet was quiet, far from the bustling cities and conflicts he had left behind. It was just him, his workshop, and his loyal dog, Rex. He had built this life from the ground up, away from the chaos of war, far from the constant noise of military life. But peace, he soon realized, was just an illusion. The evening was calm. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his small, simple home. Rex lay at Mac's feet, content as always, watching the stars blink into existence. It was a moment of serenity, a moment that wouldn't last. Without warning, the sky ripped open with a blinding flash. The earth trembled beneath their feet as a thunderous boom followed, shaking the very ground Mac stood on. "What the hell?" Mac muttered, instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Rex sprang to his feet, hackles raised, his ears flattened against his head. The dog was already alert, sensing something unnatural, something dangerous. A streak of light cut across the sky, trailing smoke and fire. It wasn't a meteor, it was a ship, crashing, fast and uncontrolled. Before Mac could process what was happening, the object screamed overhead, a dark silhouette in the fading light of day. Instinct took over. "Come on, Rex!" Mac shouted, and they took off running toward the crash site. The dog was faster than most, but Mac's years of combat training gave him an edge. The sound of the ship's descent echoed in his ears as he sprinted through his vegetable garden, the plants brushing against his legs. They reached the site moments later. The wreckage lay half buried in the soil, steam rising from the shattered remains of what had once been a sleek, elegant ship. Mac's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a military vessel or a commercial transport. It was a private shuttle, something out of place on a backwater planet like Nelvara 4. Rex growled, low and menacing, as the scent of something unfamiliar filled the air. Mac's eyes scanned the wreckage, his mind calculating. This wasn't an accident. The ship had crashed intentionally, or at least it had been shot down. As Mac approached cautiously, his eyes locked onto something strange. Small, barefoot prints in the soft soil. They led away from the wreckage, heading straight for his house. His hand instinctively went to his holstered pistol. Whoever was responsible for this wasn't far behind. Mac's pulse quickened. Whatever was going on, it wasn't good. And now, with Rex by his side, he was about to find out just how bad it really was. The mysterious children. Mac's breath came in sharp gasps as he sprinted back toward the house, his mind racing. The prints in the dirt led right to his doorstep. Something wasn't adding up. Who had survived the crash, and why were they coming to him? He reached the front door, glancing at Rex, whose body was still tense, eyes fixed on the house, with an unease Mac couldn't ignore. He slowly pushed the door open, ready for anything. The dim light inside was familiar, untouched by the chaos outside. The workbench was just as he'd left it, papers, tools, half-finished projects scattered around. The smell of dust and oil hung in the air. But there was a sound now. Something that didn't belong. A soft whimper. Mac froze, his pulse pounding in his ears. Rex's growl vibrated low in his chest, a warning, but Mac's feet moved forward instinctively, a part of him already knowing what to expect. There, huddled in the corner, were two figures, trembling and wide-eyed. Small, alien. Mac's first instinct was to reach for his weapon, but something stopped him. It wasn't their appearance, although their smooth blue skin and silvery white hair were striking. It was the fear in their eyes. The unmistakable look of children lost in a strange world, far from home. The twins, no more than 5 years old, clung to each other, their tiny hands clutching strange plush toys that seemed too fragile to offer them any comfort. They wore gray protective suits, emblazoned with symbols Mac couldn't recognize.
One of them, the braver of the two, looked up at him, her eyes a startling shade of pale ice blue. "Our mama's still on the ship," she whispered, her voice shaky but somehow musical despite the fear. Mac's heart dropped. He'd seen enough to know that this wasn't some simple accident. Whoever crashed here wasn't just lost, they were running from something, from someone. His mind raced. The ship, the unusual suits, the peculiar way these children clung to their strange toys, all of it screamed that they weren't from this planet. But if their mother was still out there, Mac couldn't ignore the pull to help. He crouched down slowly, trying to make himself as unthreatening as possible. "You're not alone," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm going to help you find your mama." But as he spoke, Rex's growl deepened. The dog wasn't just protecting the children, it was warning him too. The hairs on the back of Mac's neck stood up. Something was coming, something dangerous. Mac rose to his feet, his gaze flicking toward the door. He needed to move, but the fear in the girl's eyes kept him rooted for a moment longer. The air in the room was thick with uncertainty. These children weren't just lost, they were caught in something far bigger than themselves. "We'll find her," he promised again. But this time it wasn't just to the children, it was a promise he made to himself. Whatever brought these children to his doorstep, Mac was about to find out just what it was. The Vexari. The night air was unnaturally still as Mac stood at the window peering into the darkened yard. The only sound was the occasional rustle of the leaves through the trees, but Mac could feel the tension building. Rex was no longer growling, but the dog's body was coiled tight, like a spring ready to snap. Something was wrong, and Mac could sense it, just as he always had in combat situations. Outside, the wreckage of the crashed shuttle still smoked, its cooling systems hissing like an animal in pain. But Mac's focus wasn't on the ship anymore. It was on the strange figures now moving around his property. Their silhouettes cut through the darkness, their movements too precise, too calculated to be random. These were no ordinary survivors of a crash. Mac's eyes narrowed as he studied them through the window. The figures wore sleek, dark armor that reflected the faint light of the distant stars, their faces hidden behind full-face helmets. They moved silently, their steps in perfect sync as they set up what looked like sensor equipment at regular intervals, surrounding his house in a tightening perimeter. Rex's hackles were up again, and this time he didn't just growl, he barked sharply, his teeth bared in warning. Mac's instincts told him these weren't the children's rescuers, they were something far more dangerous. He glanced back at the twins, who were huddled together, their wide, ice-blue eyes full of confusion and fear. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "Lock the door behind me, and don't open it for anyone." The girls nodded, pressing closer to each other. Mac's heart clenched for a moment, but he turned away, slipping into his workshop. There, he moved quickly, fingers brushing over the cold steel of his tools, before finding the surveillance console hidden behind a false panel in the corner. His thumb hovered over the button to activate the feed, and then he saw it, the thermal imaging camera feed. 4 heat signatures. They weren't human, he realized immediately. Their bodies emitted less heat, a sign that they weren't organic in the same way humans were. But their movements were too fluid, too precise. These were soldiers, not scientists or survivors. Mac's gut twisted. Through the night vision feed, he could see them more clearly. Vexari. The name came to him like a warning from the past. They were a dominant species in this sector, humanoid, but with distinctive ridged foreheads and a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. They weren't known for their friendliness with humans, and relations between their species and the Terran Defense Force had always been tense. They were here for the children, and Mac would be damned if he let them take them without a fight. The Vexari weren't just searching the crash site, they were hunting something more valuable than any cargo or data the ship might have carried. Mac understood now. The children. His fingers clenched into fists as he checked the charge on his pulse rifle. It wasn't enough to just protect the children anymore. They had to escape before the Vexari realized they were too late. He moved toward the door, slipping into the shadows. As he crouched low, his mind raced with plans and contingencies. The Vexari weren't going to stop. They never did. Mac was going to have to outsmart them, and fast. Rex barked once more, his voice urgent. Mac turned, his gaze meeting the dog's knowing eyes. The Vexari were close. Too close. It was time to make his move. He had a choice to make: stay hidden and hope the Vexari moved on, or risk it all to save the children and stop the Vexari program before it spread beyond this world. The fight was about to begin, and Mac knew one thing.
No choice now, Mac muttered under his breath. Without hesitation, he bolted forward, firing a single pulse shot that struck the Vexari operative directly in the chest. The shot sent the soldier crashing to the ground in a burst of sparks and smoke. The remaining 3 operatives immediately reacted, raising their weapons and positioning themselves for a counterattack. Mac's pulse quickened as he darted behind another cluster of rocks, ducking out of sight just in time to avoid a return volley of fire. He turned to Avery, who was already moving, her eyes sharp with focus. "Keep moving," he shouted, pushing her forward. She didn't need any more prompting. Together they ran, weaving through the trees, staying low to avoid the Vexari's line of sight. As they crossed into a denser part of the forest, Mac's mind raced. He had to get them to safety, but the Vexari weren't just going to let them walk away. Avery pulled ahead, her agility and speed surprising Mac as she led the way. Her quick, calculated movements showed just how much training she had, even though she had always played the role of a scientist, not a soldier. Suddenly, Mac felt the unmistakable weight of an approaching presence behind him. He turned just in time to see one of the Vexari operatives close in, rifle raised, ready to take him down. Mac's reflexes kicked in. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast that grazed his shoulder. "Over here!" Mac shouted to Avery, but she was already ahead of him. She had taken cover, and with a swift movement, she pulled out a small device from her suit, activating a signal jammer that disrupted the Vexari's communications. The momentary confusion among the Vexari operatives gave Mac the opening he needed. He spun around, taking a precise shot that disabled their weapons and sent the remaining soldiers scattering into the woods. For a moment, there was only silence, broken only by the sound of their labored breathing. Mac turned to Avery, his pulse racing. "We've got to move, now!" The plan had changed. The Vexari had been caught off guard, but they wouldn't stay that way for long. The real fight was just beginning, and they were still outnumbered. Avery nodded, her expression unreadable, but there was a fire in her eyes now, a new determination. "I know where we need to go," she said, her voice steady. Mac glanced at her, then back at the darkened forest ahead. "Lead the way." The confrontation was far from over. It was only the beginning. The forest had swallowed them whole. The once comforting canopy now seemed like a maze of shadows, each one a potential danger. Mac's footsteps were quiet but urgent, his hands still gripping the pulse rifle. Avery moved alongside him, her eyes sharp, scanning every tree line, every flicker of movement in the distance. "We can't keep running forever," Mac muttered, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The Vexari had regrouped, and while their technology was impressive, they were no match for Mac's instincts and Avery's calculated mind. But even the best plan had its limits. Avery's gaze flicked toward him, her expression more determined than ever. "We won't need to. We have a chance if we take it." Mac paused, glancing at her, his brows furrowing. "What do you mean?" She stopped walking, turning to face him. There was no fear in her voice, only a raw intensity that was hard to ignore.
I know where the Vexari are holding the core data on the pathogen. I can destroy it, wipe out the genetic sequences they're using. It's the only way to end this." Mac felt the weight of her words. She wasn't just talking about their survival. She was talking about ending a war that could spread across the galaxy. But the Vexari weren't just going to let them walk in and destroy their weapon. There was too much at stake for them. "You're talking about going straight to their headquarters," Max said, his voice low. "That's a suicide mission." Averi's eyes didn't waver. "It's the only choice we have." Mac ran a hand through his hair, the weight of their situation crashing down on him. He had lived through war before, had seen battles fought and lost, but this was different. This wasn't just about fighting for his life, or even the lives of the children. It was about the fate of countless others, worlds he'd never seen, and people he would never meet. "They'll have an army guarding the data," Max said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We can't take them all down." Averi took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "We don't need to take them all down. We just need to get to the core and shut it down before they can stop us." Mac's thoughts raced. He knew she was right. They couldn't outroam the Vexari forever. The only way out was to confront them head-on. But that meant fighting their way through an enemy they had no idea how to defeat. "I'm with you," he said finally, his voice firm. "But we do this on our terms. We don't charge in blindly. We plan this out, every step." Averi's lips curled into a slight smile, a spark of appreciation in her eyes. "I knew I could count on you." Mac turned to look at the path ahead, the distant glow of the Vexari's searchlights flickering through the trees. The next move would be their last. It would take them to victory or bury them beneath the weight of the Vexari's relentless pursuit. "Let's make it count," Mac said, his voice steady as steel. "We get in, we destroy the data, and we get out. No heroisms. We're in this together." Averi nodded, and together they slipped deeper into the shadows, their path illuminated only by the distant flickering lights of the Vexari. Every step was a calculated risk. Every second that passed brought them closer to their goal, but it also brought them closer to the fight of their lives. Mac didn't know what the future held. He only knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about saving a few people anymore. This was about stopping an entire species from unleashing a catastrophe that could change the galaxy forever. And as they moved forward, side by side, Mac could feel the weight of the decision they had made. It was do or die. The final fight had begun, and nothing was going to stop them now. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon for more amazing videos.